the growing global response. Christina Ruffini, who is a CBS news correspondent covering foreign policy. And she has is well known for her CBS News coverage with Scott Pelley, and then CBS Weekend News and CBS This Morning. But before working as a journalist at CBS, she attended Texas Christian University and earned her degree in international communications. Later attended George Washington University and earned an MA in international relations and affairs. So Christina, thank you so very much for lending your voice to help put a focus on this very important, yet not yet really well understood or even known issue. Christina, I will turn it over to you to introduce the panel.
Thank you very much for having me. I think the reason a friend of a friend thought I might be a good pick is because I cover foreign affairs for CBS. I covered the State Department under Pompeo and now under Blinken. And I actually was an election monitor during the Zelensky-Poroshenko election. So I was in Kyiv and Dnipro during much happier times. I laugh. I still in my head every time I hear Zelensky's name to this day. You know, at the end of the elections, everybody counts each other's tickets and they swap. So they have to physically count them out because they've been so afraid of election interference electronically from Russia, even before the war, that everything is done in hard copy. So at the end of the night, the polling centers close and you have to sit there while they physically count every single ballot. And I had in my head for weeks, Zelensky, 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 Zelensky. Poroshenko, Zelensky. So it was a landslide election, but to this day, it's like a rhythm in my head every time I hear that name. Unfortunately, you know, it's tougher times now. I was actually in Munich during the Munich Security Conference last year, and it's hard to believe it was only last year, to cover Zelensky, what we thought would be his final speech outside the country, because, you know, people were telling him not to leave, and we didn't know if he was going to show up until he was actually on the ground. And then by a coincidence, something got messed up with my flight back to the US from Munich. And I stayed an extra day in Europe and thought, oh, you know, it's fine. I'll go see the sights. And Russia invaded overnight. And I got on a flight from Munich to Poland. I landed in Warsaw. I drove to the border and I was on the border for the next 6 weeks. And what I covered was basically the women and children's side, right? I spent 6 weeks watching various women and children dragging suitcases, dogs, food, standing out in the cold. I mean, I'm from Colorado. I know cold. That Ukrainian cold is like nothing I have ever witnessed. And you talk to these mothers and these little kids and you say, oh, they've been walking for 17 hours to get to the border crossing. And the one thing I found so amazing is, you know, like I said, I've covered Ukraine for a while, but you forget the resilience of Ukrainian people, but especially these women and children. You know, you would ask them these questions that anywhere else you would expect people to cry or say, you know, woe's me, or some measure of self-pity, because heck, I had it. I was freezing my arse off. And it was just like, no, this is what we're doing. We're going on to the next thing. And then we're going on to the next thing because there's a mission that needs to be done. So I'm very excited to talk to you all today, to hear your different perspectives. I'm going to, like I said, try not to mess everyone's names up. But again, my Ukrainian is quite terrible. So first we have Natalia Mudrenko. She's the officer of the permanent mission of the UN to the permanent mission of Ukraine to the UN. We have Annetta Hewko, who's with the World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations. We have Professor Milena Sterio, who's with the Public International Law and Policy Group, and Anastasia Marushevska, a co-founder at PR Army and Where Are Our People?
Excuse me, Christina, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know, we asked Janice Helwig from the Helsinki Commission. She was going to be in the panel about the Washington part, but because of her work with the Helsinki and the OSCE and the work that she's doing, you know, globally, we've asked her to participate in this session as well.
So thank you all very much. The first thing I wanted to do is just kind of go around, and if you could say, because this is a bit of a bleak topic sometimes, is there anything you're seeing that's going right in your organizations? Or is there anything you're seeing that has had a little bit of progress or a little bit of traction with this issue? Because especially when we talk about the issue of returning these children who were forcibly removed, there doesn't seem to be a lot of policy action on that front. And maybe we can talk about why you think that is, what the difficulties are, and where you might have seen some progress. And Natalia, if we could start with you.
I think it would be really important to hear from Natalia and hear from the UN mission about the work that they have been doing, and certainly they have been real catalysts for change. They held on February 22nd, just before the UN vote on the position on Ukraine. The mission held a high-level event where they really brought to light this whole issue that we're discussing today, and featured the Yale report as well as other studies that have been done. And I was present at that event, and that was my first introduction into the real scale of it and what is or is not happening. And since I just saw Natalia jump on, I'm going to defer to her first, because I think she can provide a much broader and certainly a more impactful discussion. Вітаємо, Наталю.
Thank you very much, Annetta. Good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to join this distinguished audience and to deliver my brief introduction regarding the work that was carried out by the permanent mission of Ukraine to the United Nations. Because as many of you are aware, the Russian Federation's aggressions and all these shameful crimes against Ukrainians started back 2014, and Ukraine and our delegation, we were continuously raised and disclosed these violations in the UN. But since the full-scale invasion last February, our delegation, our mission, has constantly emphasized the gross human rights violations, particularly the crimes, the heinous crimes against children and women. And we made it at the statements of the Security Council, of the General Assembly, and all other platforms. At the UN, our primary goal is to consolidate international support for Ukraine in countering Russian aggression, given that this is the only organization comprised all 193 member states, which represents governments of these states. And we are also aimed to involve all possible UN mechanisms and agencies to alleviate the suffering of Ukrainians, and to increase pressure on the aggressor to stop and cease its heinous crimes. Currently, the UN conducts its largest humanitarian operation in Ukraine, and various UN agencies presented in Ukraine, be it UNICEF, UNFPA, OCHA, all others, they continue to scale up their activities. Also UN Security Council's monitoring mechanism for crimes against children, which entitled Mandate Children and Armed Conflict and on Sexual Violence, which called Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, were activated in the context of the Russian full-scale invasion. Also, the Independent Commission of Inquiry was established in Geneva by the Human Rights Council. The International Criminal Court are also very active to investigate Russia's crimes. And I would like also mention that since 2014, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission operates in Ukraine. All these findings and reports are critically important to ensure accountability and bring in all perpetrators and their commanders to account. And as you all well know, the ICC recently issued the arrest warrant for Putin and its Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova. And this is just a first step, but very important step for accountability. I would also would like to mention that on February 22nd, we held a high-level event at the UN headquarters to highlight gross human rights violations, war crimes, and crimes against humanity caused by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. This conference marked the first year of full-scale invasion and the 9th year since the beginning of Russian aggression against our country. The event received unprecedented attention, and numerous high-level officials spoke at the opening, including the First Lady of Ukraine, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mudrenko, and also foreign ministers of the Netherlands, Estonia, Guatemala, and Canada, to name just a few. As a part of our efforts to highlight the crimes on sexual violence committed by Russian invaders in Ukraine, we also organized a series of events at the margins of the session of the Commission on the Status of Women in March this year. And I know that Sfujo was very actively engaged in its preparations and organization. Taking this opportunity, I would also like to invite you to follow tomorrow's informal Security Council meeting, ARIA Formula meeting, entitled Addressing the Abduction and Deportation of Children During Armed Conflict, Concrete Steps for Accountability and Prevention. It will be held tomorrow at the UN headquarters. The event is aimed to draw particular attention to the increasingly prevalent problem of children abductions and deportations during armed conflicts, such as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and to consolidate global actions by various sectors to address this pressing challenge and issue. Also, the broadcast on the UN resources was blocked by the Russian Federation. The event will be broadcasted on alternative programs and channels, and we will publish a link on our mission's Facebook and Twitter resources, so please follow. And thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful and important discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Annetta, if you could maybe pick up there and talk to us a little bit about why you think we haven't really seen a lot of successful legislation either in the UN or even some of the things individual countries, the EU, are trying to do, and then tell us a little bit about your organization and what you're working on, what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. In terms, I think there's probably other people that are better qualified to talk about some of the political perspectives on that. I do think one of the things we as an organization that is a convener and a connector, and we really strive to raise awareness on some of these issues. And we represent a federation of Ukrainian women's organizations in over 30 countries. So what we really want to focus on is raising awareness, starting the dialogue. So some of the things that are going really well is meetings like this are occurring. The UN mission had the meeting on the 22nd. We, as a member of the NGO community that the UN recognizes, the Economic and Social Council recognizes, we have been a part of the Council on the Status of Women since our inception. And recently they had a week-long of meetings, and we convened a series of meetings and were really addressing some of the hard issues on the violence that women are facing. And we have also set up a commission on anti-war violence, gender-based violence, and that was featured very strongly at the CSW as well. In addition, our organization works very much actively in the UN in Geneva as well. And our main representative, Dr. Katarina Bondar, just in March has appeared 3 different times speaking to the various commissions. And as Natalia alluded to, the Commission on the Inquiry into Ukraine. And so we've been very active there. We here in the United States, we work very closely with one of our partner organizations, which is the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. And you'll be hearing from Marta Fedorov on the next panel about some of their activities. But we host a lot of awareness raising and roundtable discussions and panels in the New York area and around the country and around the globe through our partner organizations.
And you just had a delegation of 28 Ukrainian women come to witness. And can you tell us, what the takeaways were from that and how it's impacted the situation?
Well, for us, obviously it's inspired us to want to do more, that we need to mobilize to help. We also, have had the film screening on March 6th, and certainly working closely with the UN, with the Council on the Status of Women to help us to work to advocate at the UN, as well as on Capitol Hill and in the United States and across the globe, for all countries to put pressure on the ICC, on the other bodies who can actually bring these people to justice. The perpetrators need to be held accountable. And also, we want to raise this awareness and to help and to support partner organizations who can actually be on the ground, who can actually help these women. And by convening these groups, by participating in these panels, and by raising awareness, we think that we can make a big impact that way.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
Janice, I'll go to you next. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my dog quiet, which is why if you see little ears pop up, that's what that is. Janice, I'm going to go to you next since I left you off initially. And again, I apologize. Could you update us on the status of what's happening in Helsinki? The commission has had a lot of hearings and meetings, including at least 2 this year. Who are you working with, and have you seen any progress or changes in the last year? If you could just bring us up to date. And does this issue come up in Helsinki? Is this something that's on people's minds, or are they more focused on, the big numbers and they don't get to issues that, sometimes get pushed aside, which often, unfortunately, can be women's issues and children's issues?
Thank you. Yes. And so just by way of introduction, so our Helsinki Commission, we're housed here in Congress, but we're an independent government agency that follows the countries that participate in the OSCE, and we try to work on making sure that they're implementing their commitments. So in that respect, we work very closely with the State Department. We work very closely with civil society and with experts. And you're exactly right. We've been holding hearings on this issue. We've been holding briefings on this issue. The issue of children abducted to Russia and Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine is a huge priority for our commissioners. I'd say one of the top priorities right now. We are looking at possibly some legislation, but basically looking at what should be an international response. What would be the most effective thing? Our commission works very closely with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. That's part of what our mandate is. And as a matter of fact, I just got back from Vienna from a conference that the OSCE held there, where the United States, Ukraine, Germany, and others held a side event exactly on this topic, including with the authors of the Yale report, with civil society in Ukraine working on the issue. And this was kind of our discussion. Sort of what is the OSCE and other international organizations doing? What can be the most effective? I don't want to stray too much into the next panel, but it'll be a little bit hard not to. So for us, that's how we're trying to engage. In the OSCE, they invoked what's called the Moscow mechanism a few weeks ago. This triggers an international investigation and report and recommendations. And this is very specific to the children abducted to Russia and Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. It will come out probably the end of next week. It's a very fast mechanism. So we're watching that. We're also looking at the OSCE's new support project for Ukraine. This is a field mission that will be in the country and looking at what kind of a mandate it could have. And let me just talk about some of the kinds of issues that we've been looking at and raising. One is tracking children who are missing and the possible need for a registry. And that's one of the things I know the Ukrainian government has one, and there are some other efforts, but that's something we'd really looking to the OSCE and others. Doesn't really matter what the platform is, to see whether we can keep track of the children. And you know, one of the points that we were discussing in Vienna this week is, should that include things like DNA? Because you know, as we know, as these children are being moved and adopted into Russian families, their identity is completely being erased. And so they may be one of the only ways to identify them in the future when we're looking at family reunification. One of the other things we're looking at is trauma support and whether what we can do to support children being returned. And that could be perhaps a project for the OSCE or for others. I know they are looking at that as well. And holding accountable also the perpetrators, I think, is one of the other pieces that for the international community is extremely important. And this is obviously you have the International Criminal Tribunal and the indictments that have already been made against Putin and the Russian Commissioner on Children's Rights, but we need to look at the others. I think, as is mentioned in the Yale report, and we need to look at whether there should be sanctions against these individuals, and also just war crimes in general. You know, one of the things we were discussing in Vienna this week is the Nuremberg trials. It's kind of interesting to note that the Nazis actually abducted more than 200,000 Polish children during World War II and took them to Germany to also assimilate them and put them up for adoption. And this is one of the war crimes that was tried in Nuremberg. So for us also, that is a very important piece of it. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And I think that segues pretty well into Milena. I wanted to ask you some of the legal challenges. What mechanisms are best to try to prosecute these crimes, go after people who are guilty of taking these children away from their families? Are there any advantages? Does the ICC action have any advantage for holding perpetrators accountable? And what are some of the obstacles you're seeing in trying to bring these people to justice in the future?
Thank you, Christina. What an excellent question. And thank you so much to the Ukraine USA Foundation for organizing this event today. And Natalia mentioned and Annetta mentioned the high-level UN conference on February 22nd, which was truly phenomenal. I was honored to be a part of that conference. And, you know, the conversations there were truly inspiring. There was also testimony from individuals who had been detained by Russian forces and who had experienced torture and mistreatment. So on your question about basically the options for prosecuting those who commit crimes such as the forcible deportation of children, or also crimes committed against Ukrainian women who are held in captivity, such as torture, rape, other acts of sexual violence. There are various options, at least in theory, for prosecuting those who commit those kinds of heinous so-called atrocity crimes. One option, which you already mentioned, is the International Criminal Court, which is the only permanent international criminal court, which is located in The Hague in the Netherlands. The ICC already has jurisdiction over the crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed in Ukraine. And that is because Ukraine lodged a declaration accepting on an ad hoc basis the jurisdiction of the ICC over these offenses. And just recently, about a month ago, the ICC actually issued 2 arrest warrants, one against the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the other against Maria Lvova-Belova, over the crime against humanity of deportation of civilians with a focus on children. Now, those arrest warrants are still under seal. We haven't seen the full text of the arrest warrants, but we have seen a very extensive press release from the ICC's Office of the Prosecutor, which details what exactly is in those arrest warrants. Now, in addition to Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova, the ICC could obviously also charge and issue arrest warrants against other Russian perpetrators of crimes, so long as they're accused of one of these 3 crimes: genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity. The ICC has jurisdiction. The problem with the ICC arrest warrants is that it is difficult to enforce them. The ICC does not have an international police force that could enter Russia and arrest them. The ICC has to rely on the cooperation of member states. So if Putin or Lvova-Belova were to travel to an ICC member state, and the ICC has 123 member states, those member states would have a legal obligation to arrest them. Now, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, because we have seen from the past that sometimes ICC member states are actually reluctant to arrest country presidents. So, for example, the former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, there has been an arrest warrant pending against him since 2009. And yet, despite that, he has been able to travel to various ICC member states, including places such as South Africa and Jordan, and those countries haven't arrested him. With respect to President Putin, there is actually a summit, a so-called BRIC summit, coming up in South Africa in August. It's going to be interesting to see, A, whether he actually travels, but B, what South Africa does. Unfortunately, there are rumors. I just read an article a couple of days ago that South Africa is actually considering withdrawing from the ICC. Now, I don't want to sound too pessimistic about the ICC. I think there's tremendous value in the fact that the ICC has actually indicted these 2 individuals and has issued arrest warrants. There's enormous symbolic value in that. There's also pressure on all these states that are members of the ICC to actually arrest them. And I think it does limit their ability to travel and to actually engage in international relations. Because even if they're fairly certain that a country like South Africa wouldn't arrest them, it's still an enormous risk to actually go there. And so I do think that this will inhibit, especially President Putin's ability to actually act as president and engage in foreign relations. And then the ICC, although it cannot conduct trials in absentia, it can hold a so-called confirmation of charges hearing with the defendants being absent. The confirmation of charges hearing is a pretrial procedural step at which the prosecutor can lay out his evidence against these individuals. And that also, I think, would be truly important, also very symbolic. And it would really allow the prosecutor to lay out all of this tremendous evidence that his office has regarding these crimes of deportation of children. Now, these 2 indictments can also be amended, and the prosecutor could add additional charges. So this is just, I think, the beginning. Now, in addition to the ICC, the other options are domestic prosecutions in the courts of Ukraine. We know that Ukraine has already prosecuted over 25 cases of war crimes. Ukraine in its domestic legislation does have, the crime of war crimes. It also has the crime of aggression, some other crimes as well. So that is a definite possibility. And as I said, we've already seen some of those prosecutions. Another option is that other states can also prosecute Russian perpetrators of these heinous crimes under the so-called principle of universal jurisdiction. Universal jurisdiction is a principle that allows a country to prosecute someone who committed a heinous crime, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, on this theory that that country is acting as an agent of the international community, that is prosecuting these heinous crimes as an agent of all mankind. So that is an option. We haven't seen universal jurisdiction prosecutions yet in the context of Ukraine, but we have seen some in the context of Syria. There have been Syrian perpetrators who were prosecuted and convicted on this principle of universal jurisdiction in Germany, and there's an important case that's going forward right now in France. And then last, but certainly not least, we have also seen calls from the Ukrainian government, supported by other states, to create some kind of an ad hoc or special tribunal that could be created through an agreement between Ukraine and the international community, for example, the United Nations General Assembly. And in particular, we have seen calls for the creation of such a tribunal that would be able to prosecute the crime of aggression. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, does not have jurisdiction over aggression. And so there have been calls to create a special tribunal that would be able to prosecute individuals like Vladimir Putin and others for the crime of aggression. Now, when it comes to the specific crimes of deportation of children and the mistreatment of captive women, I wanted to mention that the crime of deportation of children is definitely a crime against humanity. And again, these arrest warrants that the ICC has issued are for the crime against humanity of deportation of children, but they can also constitute the crime of genocide if they're committed with the intent to destroy the Ukrainian national group. And so as of now, the ICC prosecutor has not issued an arrest warrant for genocide. Genocide is very difficult to prove. Now, in the context of Ukraine, I think we're seeing evidence of this type of genocidal intent. And so who knows, maybe at some point down the line, the prosecutor would actually amend these indictments and the arrest warrants and actually add genocidal charges. And last, when it comes to the crime of mistreating captive women, crimes of sexual violence, rape, torture are definitely can be prosecuted as crimes against humanity. And I would add that it is also a war crime to mistreat civilians in captivity. And so all of that to say is that I think we have extensive evidence of very serious crimes such as war crimes, crimes against humanity, and perhaps genocide that have been committed, that we have these prosecutorial options, the ICC, domestic prosecutions, prosecutions in the courts of third countries under universal jurisdiction, and then also the creation of a special tribunal. We have these options. Some are already being utilized, but I think it's important to continue to have these types of conversations so that we're advocating in favor of more accountability, and so that we're creating this impetus in the international community to support this wide range of prosecutorial options.
Thank you very much. There's a lot in there. I have about 8,000 follow-up questions, but I want to make sure we get to all our panelists. So I'm gonna circle back. Anastasia, you're like on the front lines of this with your organization. I want to know, when and how did you start doing this? What are you doing to try to bring more groups together so that you can have a greater reach? What do you need? What are you missing? What are the biggest problems you see? And then, what do you think would be a good way to get more progress on this issue of returning, Ukrainian people who want to come home but can't return?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. If my internet is dropping, I'm sorry, because I have weird conditions of having this roundtable today. Well, I wanted to talking about when we started doing this. We started, the first interview I did with a person who have been deported was in April 2022. And we started talking about the deportations since July, and we came to Ukrainian government to talk about this before they even realized there is a problem. So we started kind of talking, working with media, because this was our main focus as the PR army. We facilitated over 5,000 materials in different international media, and we started by collecting witnesses and collecting stories and pitching it to media and making different kind of stories about the deportations. And it grew into the project called Where Are People, where we combine kind of media and advocacy campaigning. What kind of problems I see is, of course, that everyone is doing something, but it's not not everyone is united. Just by taking example of Europe, for example, there is a very promising statement by the European Commission that they're uniting their efforts with Ukraine, Poland, and the EU and the UN to build a mechanism of repatriation of Ukrainian children. But then you talk to Germany about it. Germany is like, yeah, well, we were surprised to hear this because we're working with Netherlands on this topic. And then you talk to Estonia and you're like, okay, Estonia, this is it's your topic. You've been deported. And they're like, of course, but that's why we're working with Ukrainian government. Who are you? You're an NGO. And so this is like, great. It's, of course, for me, who started working with this topic before everyone believed that it's actually happening. To see this progress is absolutely amazing. But to say that everyone is very united, I would not say it. I would say that Ukrainian side is united, like civil society, because we work probably with every organization that works with topic of deportations. Like I just write my stupid questions to lawyers all the time because I'm not a lawyer, but I need to understand all of these details of who is who, where, whose role is where, you know. What I would like to, I guess, mention is there is one side that is really rarely considered, especially in the US, I believe, which is better implemented in the EU, is sanctions and restrictive measures, because we collected the whole list of people involved in the deportations, which have not been even considered and even mentioned. And many of them are a part of Russian Orthodox Church. And we have evidence that these people are involved directly in the deportation. They resist repatriation of children. They hide children. And for example, just one example of a lady called Anna Belavina, and she's the head of Orthodox Relief Service, which is the part of Russian Orthodox Church. And she's not just involved in deportation, she's also involved in Russian army because she collects money for Russian army and going to Russian occupied territories of Ukraine and stuff like this. And there are many, many people who are actually personally involved in abducting children and hiding them, because you understand that hiding information about children is already a crime. So we do not even need to go that far, because I also work with journalists a lot and I repeat the same story from the beginning all the time. I start from explaining, okay, you don't need to put a gun to the head to call this forcible deportation. Yeah, like if there is no choice, this is forcible. Like if the person living in the basement for half a year and then you tell them, okay, you either go to Russia or you die from hunger, the person will go to Russia. But somehow, well, but this is not forcible. So I need to kind of explain this all over again, all the time. So here I have a different audience, so I do not need to do it. So I go much more above this. Like another, what I would like to mention is the involvement of the UN, of the ICRC, or specifically of UNICEF. It makes me very confused who is doing what, of course. It's a very confusing system. And just recently, because when we started working on this project, of course, we appealed to UNICEF, to everyone. UNICEF told us, sorry, this is individual cases. We do not work on individual cases. We're like, yeah, there is just 500,000 children deported, the very individual case. And as far as I know, now they are involved. But like half a year ago, they none of these organizations replied to our request. Now I know that ICRC stated, as well as UNICEF, that have contacted Maria Lvova-Belova. And also ICRC is offering their Central Tracing Agency Bureau to trace children, which, like, I'm not a lawyer again, I'm not a human rights activist, so I might be mistaken in the way the system is built. But I believe that considering this problem as tracing individual children is wrong. Because when, for example, I speak to Coalition 5 AM, which is the biggest human rights coalition that works, we have Center for Civil Society for Civil Liberties before here. They're also the part of Coalition 5 AM. And they told me that if we will try to use the same mechanisms that exist now of repatriating children, we will need 50 years to repatriate just identified children, which is around 20,000. And according to Russian media, there is 700,000 deported children. So the idea of individual tracing is irrelevant, I believe, to change the policy. Of course, it's absolutely crucial to reunite families. And I will never say that someone should stop doing it, like never. But what I'm saying, this is two processes that need to exist simultaneously. I believe that only the big mechanism of repatriation with someone playing as a neutral side can be possible. And I do not see ICRC or the UN as being this neutral side, because ICRC have not been present in prisons on the Ukrainian in Russian occupied territories in Ukraine since 2014. Ukrainians have been tortured, but we never received any information about what's going on there. So we really have not a lot of trust in what's going to happen. I believe that every time we speak about deportation, we need to explain that this is a policy and the system. This is not random abduction of children. That's why, for example, I don't really like the word abduction, because abduction is like, okay, some crazy lunatic abducted a child. Well, no, this is some absolutely regular, average Russian came and took these children. And this is a system that been implemented on historical scale, because during the Soviet times, Soviet Russia has implemented 110 deportations. And they did not deport Russians, they deported other nations. And we've seen it happened, it's the same story. But every time I need to kind of go back and tell, when I say, for example, this is the amount of people that have been deported, no one trusts me. Because I'm Ukrainian, of course, I'm very emotional about the war, so they should not trust me. And I was like, well, but no, it cannot be, this is too much. I was like, well, look at history. It happened already. Yeah, this is not too much, this is nothing new. And so that's why for us at PR Army and Where Are People, we're trying to build this kind of logic, starting from the academic research to what kind of policies and systems have been implemented historically, what is repeating right now, and what is the whole system of actually returning people. Because there have not been a successful story of repatriating millions of people. It never happened, only much smaller amounts. So when you speak, for example, so what is the solution to bring back people? Because of course, children is the most sensitive topic and it's the first priority, but there is also adults. And adults, many of them are people with disabilities, many of them are elderly people who cannot live by themselves. And when we talk about repatriation of all of these people, we need to understand that the only way is for Ukraine to win and for Russia to accept its defeat, because there is no other situation that someone coming to Russia and taking millions of people out of Russia. So even though I believe that ICC warrant is very important because it's actually motivated many organizations to do something, I believe that it will not bring our children back. Because just a little emotional take from me as a Ukrainian, I do not care if Putin is in prison. But I do care that that Russian families who believed that taking a child and not trying to find his family will be punished. And Hague will never provide this. So when we speak about actually finding justice, that, well, we will never find it. So the only thing I'm focusing on is returning people. So this is our position, and this is what we're trying to understand, because what I'm doing, I'm understanding something every day. I'm talking to one organization that explained me one thing. I talk to another that explained me another thing. So it's very awesome to be here and to be introduced to other people involved as well in this topic, to have a clear image on what have been done and what kind of efforts we should put to unite and to kind of support each other more. This is, I have a lot to say, of course, and a lot to comment, because as there is also Katya Pavlevich here, she's going to be speaking in the next panel. We're deportation girls. So wherever we go, this is a flair that we have, because we're always talking about deportations. So yeah, of course, I have too much to say. So thank you a lot for giving me a possibility to share my emotional appeal. And thank you, everyone.
course, as I said earlier, don't mess with the fierceness of Ukrainian women. So I wouldn't want to be sitting across from you being in the way of whatever you were trying to do. Listening to everyone on this panel, it sounds like, you know, it sounds like people are aware of the issue. It sounds like lots of people are talking about it. The issue seems to be organization, who's doing what, who's in the best position to do what, who should do what. You know, implementation, how are they going to do it? What exactly are they going to do? And then the mechanism, what is the mechanism by which to get this done, by which to hold people accountable or by which to repatriate these children? So I'm just opening it up to the floor here. Does anyone have any thoughts on any of those three issues? Anything that stands out to you as something that is glaringly obvious, or things that you don't know? You know, anybody got any thoughts on those three problems?
Christina, I can weigh in very briefly on this issue of coordinating the different accountability options. Unfortunately, you know, I do think that that's an area that we can all do better in. As I mentioned, the Ukrainian government has been advocating very strongly in favor of having an ad hoc tribunal that would be able to prosecute the crime of aggression. As I mentioned, as you mentioned, the ICC also has issued arrest warrants. The ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, has been against the establishment of a separate aggression tribunal. You know, at a separate webinar, we can get into the reasons behind that and whether that's a good idea. But we know that the ICC is not necessarily, at least the prosecutor is not necessarily in favor of using that particular accountability option. The ICC should be in favor of Ukrainian prosecutions because the ICC itself functions on this principle of complementarity, which means essentially relying on national jurisdictions and only acting as a court of last resort. But I think more could be done on this issue of coordinating all the different options and ensuring that the different prosecutorial and investigative teams are actually working together.
Thank you very much. Janice, you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. I mean, I think what we've heard today highlights some of the problems and the challenges that we have. And I would say international cooperation and coordination is probably at the top of the list. You know, I agree with Anastasia we've been trying to figure out issues like a registry and trying to collect information in one place. You really need, of course, you know, a neutral, you know, unbiased collector who can really protect all the information. It's like, it's a bit of a moving target because there's more than one. And when you try to check into, you know, who's doing this one and who's doing that one, it's really difficult. So I think international coordination, particularly among international organizations, is something that is not happening and really needs to happen more. I think the second thing is there's a couple of different pieces to figure out how can you be effective. You know, the first one is stopping it from happening now. I mean, when you talk about the pieces of, let's say, sanctions or indictments, I think this is, of course, to hold people accountable, but I think it's also to try to stop it, to send a signal from the international community that this isn't going to be accepted. And if you continue to go down this road, you're probably going to end up in jail at some point. And then you have the issue of returning the children, which is a huge challenge because, as we've said, we don't know how many even are there. We don't know where they are. Getting that information out of Russia is going to be incredibly difficult while the war is going on. I do think the international community needs to do as much as it can to pressure Russia to get as much information as possible. But that in itself is an enormous challenge. I'll stop there.
Annetta, did you have any thoughts on this?
Two things. One, I would just concur with everyone about the big international organizations. To be honest, it's the whole humanitarian response in Ukraine has been very weak from the big global organizations. And most of the things that are happening in Ukraine are small NGOs. They're what I call pop-up NGOs that have that have been coming up and doing amazing work. And we had a discussion about this the other day, that actually part of the Ukrainian DNA, I think, is a penchant for action and the ability to self-organize, to operate horizontally. And after years of whether it's Russian Empire or Soviet Empire of top down, where that does not work for Ukrainians, you know, it's this is why you have so many different organizations. It's both a blessing and a curse. And in this situation, perhaps it's difficult, but they do it also because of the absence of the international organizations in the country. So Janice and Anastasia and everybody, I think they hit the nail on the head saying that it's about getting them coordinated, but it's also getting them genuinely activated and on the ground and doing the things that you know they're chartered to do. But in the meantime, you know, organizations like ours, like that can help in terms of pulling together initiatives across the globe or, through our partner organizations, or, you know, organizations like Anastasia's who just are getting the job done and are going out and making it happen, because there's a job of, you know, registering and reporting, and then the actual rescue and the reunification. And I think there's just a lot of work to be done. And when it comes to children, that's, you know, that's the most emotive, that gets at the core of a parent, of who a parent is, and they want action now. And so that's why you've got these smaller initiatives going on, but definitely international coordination. But activation and coordination needs to happen.
Thank you all so much. That is our time for today. Thank you very much for participating. Anastasia, do you have one more you want to jump in there real quick? Okay.
Yeah. I want to add to these. I believe that when we talk about building mechanisms, we need to start from something very simple, because the international community does not pressure Russia or even ICRC to be present at places of filtration and deportation, which absolutely amazes me. So I don't hear even this being discussed as something regarding the war. Also, we need to understand that if we talk about Nuremberg trials or something, yeah, we went and took Berlin. Are we going to go and take Moscow? How are we going to actually bring millions of people back without Russia understand that they're defeated and that there is no way out? And I believe that international community can be very diplomatic for a very long time, but in the end of the day, the only way to stop this is actually to liberate territories and to make Russia lose big time. And I don't see any other way. So when we talk about bringing those people back, we need to understand what it actually involves. President Zelensky shared his formula of peace, and returning all of the deported is one of the points in this formula of peace. And I believe that we really need to follow this because we cannot say that the war has stopped if there are Ukrainians inside Russia. So I believe that just to have some from time to time reality checks, to understand that there is this unification is very important to actually show Russia that allies are united like never before, that we're actually thinking about reforming the global security system, that we're thinking about our past mistakes, and we're looking for somehow new ways to build actual peace in Europe. Because I believe that in many ways it's a European problem, because it's a European land, but the US as usual stand up to play the key role in actually solving most of the crisis. But I believe that maybe this war will also push Europe to be stronger and to be capable to stand for itself. But it's a more global issue than deportation. But I believe that actually building this mechanism of repatriation can be the first step in realizing that what kind of reforms we need in a global security system. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much for your time today. We are out of it. I appreciate your work. And like I said, I think the role Ukrainian women have played in this war, maybe because We just haven't been in a position to see it quite like we have with this conflict, unfortunately. But I know it's something I'll never forget, and I'm sure the world feels the same way. So thank you all very much for being with us today.
Christina, again, thank you for moderating this discussion. And of course, you can tell because of your actual personal engagement that you are a great person for us to continue to interact with and cooperate in the future.
Yes, please reach out anytime.
I think what has been discussed today by all of our panelists is precisely why this roundtable is taking place. To first begin to create a network among organizations that are already doing things, and for you all to meet each other and to grow this cooperative effort, but also to identify, as was discussed, what are some concrete steps that can be taken in the different arenas and the different panels. And Anastasia, I have to share with you some of your frustrations. Words matter, and you zeroed in on abduction. Well, I've zeroed in on terms like re-education. They're not re-education, right? They're brainwashing things. So we've got to get our messaging down. And also the challenges of challenging international organizations, that for them to take their rightful role and act on it. You mentioned the IRC. Well, we didn't necessarily maybe have much hope when they opened up their humanitarian office, within Russia itself. But we will continue and press on. And Milena, I have to say, I'm, I guess, somewhat along maybe with Anastasia, discouraged when you're discussing about the warrants by the ICC. We launched this advocacy informational campaign in January, and you conducted the very first discussion about the legal issue of this abduction. And I believe the whole panel of your experts said it was genocide. And yet what you're saying is that the ICC warrant is not using that terminology. They're resisting it. And so it appears that there's so much work to be done in every channel and every opportunity. But I think the people that we've had here today, I think we will do things and we'll make progress, I'm sure. So again, thank you very, very much for your participation. Look forward to continuing our work together. And so before our last panel discussion, I think Milena will maybe show the little video we have from Find My Parent. It's a little bit out of sequence. What's great about these organizations, you're not just talking about things, you are actually getting things done, whether it's rescuing children or the cooperation with Find My Parent and Ukraine's police department to create this app. So I think we will show just a little video that describes it a little bit more.
Did you know that there are over 20,000 people who have been reported missing in Ukraine since the start of the war in February 2022? Many more may be missing outside of Ukraine. As the conflict soars, more are at risk of being separated from their families, including children. Find My Parent, in partnership with the National Police of Ukraine's Juvenile Prevention Division, is announcing the launch of its free mobile app that makes finding and reuniting missing individuals easy. The app can even be used to identify deceased persons so families get the closure they need. By simply registering using email or phone number, your geolocation will be verified, and you will be able to create a profile with vital data in it. All you need to do is fill in some information. The app then uses AI technology to process your information for a possible match. Matches are confirmed by the Ukrainian police to keep the children and families safe. Upon matching, you will be notified and will have to give consent to message a match. The Reunite Ukraine mobile app, now available on iOS and Google Play stores, uses the power of AI technology, the highest security and data protection standards. Download the app now so you are prepared in case someone in your family goes missing. The general public, hospitals, shelters, nonprofit organizations, and any organizations working with the families of missing persons or the deceased should download and benefit from the app. For more information, visit reunite-ukraine.com.